Welcome back to the latest episode of the Lowen Behold podcast, formerly known as the Off the Backboard podcast. This week we've got Greg Finberg, legend of Wizards Twitter, joining us.
What's up? Really appreciate you having me on. I think I've been on your podcast one other time, and I actually really enjoyed that pod. So appreciate you having me back on. It's been a minute, but I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Hope you've been well. Let's jump right into it. First of all, we're going to be covering the Wizards this week, but whenever the Wizards come up in media recently, there's one thing that sticks out. So I'm going to ask your thoughts on it. What are your thoughts on the Trae Young trade, both the short-term impact and long-term impact, just anything to do with Trae Young on the Wizards?
Yeah, I mean, when the rumors first started with the Trae Young stuff, it was kind of peculiar because it wasn't on anyone's radar. It was kind of out of left field, and you see a lot of these rumors each year where it's like this player's linked to this team, and it doesn't really make sense. And when that was the case, it was like, yeah, they have a needed point guard, but I didn't think they would address it with Trae Young. I thought they'd address it in the draft or maybe in free agency. They still have Bub Carrington, Trey Johnson. Like they have a lot of guards that they could try there, and I didn't think they would make a swing like this because this is the first real like big trade that they've made to acquire someone that they actually expected to keep. You know, CJ McCollum, Chris Middleton, Kyle Kuzma, the Jordan Poole. Those were all guys that you didn't really think were going to be here for the long haul. Maybe Poole, but you knew all of them would eventually probably be gone by the start of when they're trying to really ascend with this rebuild. So I wasn't necessarily expecting the move when the rumors started, but then you started to see it pick up more and more. And a couple of days later, I think it was right after the Wizards finished losing to the Sixers in Philly, then the trade news broke. Because I remember I was at that game and you saw like CJ McCollum was already out. His first game he missed all year with some calf injury. That was not true. And then you saw last minute Corey Kispert warm up and then get taken out of the game before. So you knew the trade was going to happen. And then they made the move. Atlanta thought they would get draft picks. They did it. The Wizards probably thought they would get some draft compensation, and that's probably what the holdup was. It turns out to be a player for player trade, 2-for-1. Um, it's clear that the Wizards got the best player in the trade in the prime of his career. You could argue that the prime already happened, but he's 28, and you know this is typically the age of where most guys hit their prime. He's dealt with some injuries, especially this season. He's had an MCL sprain, he's had a quad contusion. He's only played 10 games so far and hasn't played for the Wizards and won't through the All-Star break. But they got the best player by a mile. So if you're assessing it based on a player for player swap, CJ McCollum, 34-year-old, wasn't going to be here next year. Corey Kispert, younger than him at 26, but he's a catch and shoot guy on a contending team. And on the Wizards, he did a lot more because he was asked to do a lot more. But that contract was given out by Dawkins. He also wasn't drafted by Dawkins. And so the Wizards get the best player by a mile, a player that can lead this team, a player that can fit a position of need at point guard because they have their center in Sar. They have one of their forwards in George. They have another one of their wings in Koulibaly. Their two guard in Trey Johnson, a combo guard in Bub Carrington, another wing in Will Riley, but they just don't have that point guard. They haven't found it yet. And it's clear to me that they sort of saw Trae Young and this value at the lowest it's been probably since he was drafted. Because 2, 3 years ago, you saw his name coming up in rumors, and it was four picks, four first round picks, four pick swaps, and all of this. And now you just gave away an expiring contract and another player who's sort of a role player on most teams to get him. Like, that's insane value. The one downside is the contract. He's a $49 million player option. I'm sure he'll opt into that. If not, he'll get an extension. So you're going to be paying him a lot of money. But the Wizards also have to meet a salary cap floor. Like, they need to be giving out enough money next season. And with everyone on the team, apart from Trey now, on a rookie deal or on a veteran minimum, they need a big contract. They probably need multiple. And so I'm not too worried about that. What I'm more concerned about is the fact that they got a really good player for insane value that I think can fit a position of need. Now, how does he fit alongside their young core? I think he'll make a lot of things easier for Alex Sarr in that pick and roll game. We saw what he did for a guy like Clint Capella, got him paid. You have Trey Johnson who can just catch the ball and shoot it, which is what he does best. That's what Trae Young can do. Keyshawn George, Blake Coulibaly, none of these guys have played with a real point guard. Trae Young's going to be the first. He's a true point guard. That makes everyone around him better. Jordan Poole was called a point guard here. He's not a point guard. He's a scoring guard that plays point guard. This year, Bub Carrington is a combo guard that they've had to play a lot of point guard. CJ McCollum played point guard for a lot. So I think, yes, these guys are developing at a good rate, but you haven't seen them with a true point guard. And I think with the Trae Young trade at great value, they get that. And even if it's a trial run, you get to see what he can be with this team before shelling out a lucrative contract extension. And you're not in cap hell because it's only an additional year at $49 million if he opts in. So I don't really see too much downside in the move, and I see a lot of upside. And that's been sort of the theme of a lot of moves that Will Dawkins and this front office have done. So again, maybe it doesn't work out, maybe it does, but the value is just, I think, too good to pass up on if you're Washington.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. And I remember the day that the trade happened, I remember they made a big deal of showing Corey Kispert's pregame routine. He was talking about how he was feeling good. And then like half an hour before the game, they're like, actually, he's sick. And then even Nick Nurse after the game, he's like, he wasn't sick. But yeah, Trae Young, I feel like will be tremendous for the development of specifically Alex Sarr and Trey Johnson. I think he'll be fantastic for them. Bilal as well. Do you see any follow-up deals following this big trade? Potentially Marvin Bagley being moved. I've seen some talks of potentially getting another first for Marvin Bagley, potentially packaging him and maybe somebody else to move up into the mid-lottery. What other moves do you see the Wizards making here before the February 5th deadline?
The Bagley's interesting. Like, again, the Wizards traded him last year at the deadline, so they clearly have shown a willingness to part with him, and he was great last year too. He's even better this year. He's only playing 19 minutes a game, and he's still averaging 10.6 boards on 60% from the field. He's playing good defense. Like, he's the ideal backup center, and on some teams could maybe compete for a starting forward role at the 4, where I probably think he plays best. But he's been awesome off the bench. The Wizards traded him last year as part of the trade with Johnny Davis to bring back Marcus Smart in that first-round pick. That trade to get the first wasn't necessarily because Bagley was playing so well. It was because they wanted to get off Smart's contract, and the Wizards had the ability to take that back. Now you go over to this year, and the Wizards still have that cap space, right? They traded McCollum, they traded Kispert. Like they still have cap space to do so. They have an open roster spot to take back another contract or 2-to-1 player in a trade. So they have given themselves the flexibility yet again to make a trade like that. If a team is willing to give you a 1 straight up for Bagley, you do it in 5 seconds. I think they signed him to a 1-year vet minimum deal. It's worked out tremendously. Let's say you trade him, it's okay because he'll be a free agent again, and maybe you bring him back. But you have Tristan Vukcevic, who's been up and down, but he's kind of that center in the waiting. You've seen Anthony Gill the last 2 games with Bagley and Vukcevic outplay some center minutes. It's not where you want to be ideally, but they're also not trying to win games this year. They're trying to stack assets and picks. And so if you can get a 1 for Bagley, you do it in a second. Now, that's not to say like a guy like Justin Champagnie, right, who's on I think a total like a 4-year, $10 million deal. After this season, there's 2 years left, and I think he's probably making around 2 to 2.5 in those years. So he's been awesome for them off the bench. He's on one of the best contracts in the league. He's also only 24, I think. So like that's different than Bagley, who's by the way only 26, and people probably think he's like 30, but he's still young too. I think there are different cases where Champagnie he can play a lot of roles. And he's a versatile player. He's a winning player. You saw it against Charlotte the other day. If you're going to get a 1 for him, like, again, that's really hard to turn down. But you already have so many first-round picks on this team. You're going to keep your first-round pick this year. And you already have one in the back end of the first round, which will most likely be OKC's pick from that Jared Butler for Reggie Jackson trade last deadline. How many picks do you need, And that's where you get to OKC, where it's like you can't have enough. And that's their philosophy. And that's where Dawkins comes from, where you can't have enough first-round picks, enough chances to try to hit on a guy. So I think if they have an opportunity with one of those guys to get another 1, I think they jump at it. And Wizards fans might be upset about it because they've come to really enjoy watching those guys play. But that's what Dawkins' philosophy has been. That's what Wenger's philosophy has been. That's what the team's philosophy has been the last 2-3 years. I think they'll shop them. I think they'd be smart to listen to offers for both of them. And if they can get a future 1, like based on what they've done in the past, I think they'd probably do it.
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part on that. I think Bagley, if you can get a contract, a bloated contract and a first-round pick, I think you almost have to do that, especially if it's an expiring contract. But the one part I disagree with you, I don't think Champagne is going anywhere. I think he's going to be a Wizard for the long haul. I think he's going to be here when Alex Sarr wins Finals MVP, and I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be a Wizard well past this current contract, and I don't think there's any way they move him. He's on, in my opinion, a top 3 contract in the league. The value the value he brings to a winning team is just invaluable. I don't see him going in.
I mean, I've mentioned I don't want to trade him. I don't think the Wizards
Yeah,
should trade him, and then their fans don't want to trade him. But based on the way that they've gone about their business, like I think they would be very content if a fringe playoff team was like, hey, we really want him, and because the draft order is based on regular season record after the lottery, which is how the Wizards were able to get that Memphis pick when they made the play-in, and so like let's say a team like Cleveland, who's sort of like a could be a top 4 seed in the East, could be the 5, could be the 6 record wise. That could be a top 20, top 22 pick that you're trading
yeah,
Justin Champagnie for. And if that's the value that they see, then sure. But I mean, I know when they get to next year and they're trying to win games, Justin Champagnie is going to be a million times more valuable than whatever that player turns out to be. And maybe in
yeah.
3 or 4 years, that player turns out better than Justin. But you're trying to win games next year, I would assume. And I think Justin is the perfect piece to do so. He's under contract. Like there's no rush, right, to trade him. And I think
Agreed.
a lot of times these rebuilding teams build up these role players that they sign to good contracts and immediately ship them off to try to get another like lanky wing 3-and-D guy. The Wizards have enough of those guys. You can never have enough, but I think they do have enough, especially young guys. You need players like Champagnie. And so would I trade him? No. Do I think that they will at least explore his market? Like, I think they'd be dumb not to, because you never know how desperate teams can really get.
Yeah. I'm in a group chat where we joked that he's worth 10 first round picks. It was in the middle of that Hornets game that Charles Barkley said nobody watched unless they had nothing to do. And like every time he did anything, we just added another first round pick to the total. But moving on, earlier this week, Michael Winger held a presser where he addressed the future of the Wizards a little bit. And most notably, they said the deconstruction phase of the franchise is over, which the deconstruction phase, I think you know as well as I do, they've used that phrasing several times over the last few years, where they've basically been like, yeah, we're tearing down the former roster, we're tearing down the former infrastructure, we're going to rebuild from the ground up. What do you think it means that they're saying that phase is over? What do you think the plan moving forward is?
I mean, I think it's an important step. This front office is very good with their messaging. Like even after that, they asked him, is next year going to be a year where you're looking to go to a certain place? Like, do you want to make the playoffs? Do you want to make the play-in? And Michael Winger is very quick to say, like, we're not putting any label or anything on this next season or the season beyond. Like, we're not trying to put expectations that are unnecessary and don't need to be hanging over our head. Like, we're going to try to be better next year. And we know that, and you know that, but I'm not going to come out here and say we need to make the playoffs, and then when we don't, or if we don't, everyone's disappointed. Like I think that's smart messaging from a front office to not put any added pressure on a team, especially a young team. But it is noteworthy. Like for the last since they took over, it's been the deconstruction phase, and they really did deconstruct it. Like they did what they said they were going to do. Anthony Gill is the only player on the roster still remaining from when they took over. Like the Corey Kispert was there as well, but they just traded him. You didn't think they'd trade Denny? Well, they did it, and they surprised everyone by doing it. And again, that's probably the one move that's still catching flack. And Michael Winger said we do it over and over. And there's a lot of Trailblazers fans that even tag me to this day. Like, are you still saying that about the Denny trade? It's like the Denny trade was a move for the Wizards, like for the long haul. Like they imagine Denny Avdija, one of the most ball dominant players on this in the league, playing alongside these guys. He'd probably still get 26, 8, and 8 like he is in Portland. The Wizards might win a couple more games. They'd still be pretty bad. They'd still miss the playoffs, and you wouldn't see anywhere near the development of any of these guys on the team. And so, look, I'm happy for Denny and Portland. That's what Winger said. And I think Portland's like 23 and 24, 23 and 23. Like, they're not going anywhere. And so if you're the Wizards, like, that wasn't a move to say, hey, look at us next year and you're going to say we won that trade. It's a move to say, hey, hopefully Bob Garrington pans out. We got another first round pick as well. But it's more so we didn't draft him. He's good, but we didn't draft him. And we'd rather see our own first round picks develop and grow together than see a guy who's 2, 3, 4 years ahead of them in his developmental curve sort of develop at a faster rate and take away reps and opportunities from him. And so, again, people have been sort of ripping on the front office for that move. I think if it's 2, 3 years down the line and certain stuff isn't working, then you have every right to do so. But like Michael Winger said, they're done the deconstruction phase. I think that means like they have their roster, they have their core group of guys, and they're going to add one more when they hopefully keep their pick. I mean, if you watch college basketball yesterday, I mean, DeBanza had 43, I think. Kingston Fleming's had 42. Wagler on Illinois had 46 on the road at Purdue. Like, this freshman class is insane. The Wizards have their top 8 protected pick, which, again, they're the worst team in the league at the moment. So if this holds up, they can't fall anywhere worse than 5. Their whole plan is like, we have our core. We've done really good in terms of drafting. We need to add one more blue chip prospect, ideally a top 3 pick like Peterson, DeBanza, or Boozer from Duke. And then at that point, you can go. Like, you can ascend. And you don't have to deconstruct anymore. You have your core. It's now, like Winger said, about finding which pieces of that core are good enough to stick around and which pieces aren't. Which pieces have to be dealt. You know, is Trae Young going to be a guy that can stick around? Like, I feel like next year is a year that they're going to try to compete, but it's also a year to see what their roster should look like next year when they try to contend. You saw that with OKC. Like, they nearly made the play-in and nearly made the playoffs a year before they were the 1 seed, but they didn't. And they were so competitive, but then they figured out, okay, this is who needs to stay, who needs to go. We're building around Shea. J-Dub is really good. Chet's awesome when he's healthy, and we'll be fine. And that was sort of the year that maybe the Wizards look to have next year. Not necessarily like we need to make the play on our playoffs, but we need to compete, and then we need to see who sticks, who goes. And I think that's probably what next year will be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think the exact phrasing he used when talking about the Denny trade, though, I think he said we did it to reset the timeline and reset the clock, I believe. And I absolutely agree with that. He got Bub Carrington, who fits the timeline with Sar and Keyshawn George perfectly. They're only a year younger than Bilal. Denny Avdia, 3 years older than Bilal. It's their young core is now 3-4 years younger. Plus, they have another draft pick here in 3 years. And Portland's young core is looking a little underwhelming compared to where we thought we would be at the time that trade was made. Scoot Henderson hasn't been playing. Shaden Sharp hasn't been playing. I would argue Shaden Sharp's actually better than Denny Avdia when he plays. It's just he never plays, and he's more impactful to winning. So that 2029 first-round pick could become another lottery pick here, depending on how the Blazers play their cards. But that's not a team I'm looking at long-term, being like, oh yeah, they're at a good spot. I think the Wizards are in a much better spot, and that's ultimately within the context of that. I think that's an absolute win from a trade when you contextualize everything else going around.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I mean, it's also a point like Portland started the year, I think 12 and like 19, and they've won a couple games when they've gotten healthy. But like you mentioned, they have a bunch of players that are never healthy. Like Scoot
Yeah.
Henderson is really never healthy. They don't even know what's going on with them. They traded for Drew Holiday, who hasn't been healthy most of this season. Robert Williams has barely played for them since they acquired him like 2 years ago because he's never healthy. Imagine Shaden Sharp. So like you can be upset with injuries and say, well, we're just not good because of the injuries, but you acquired and drafted players that are injury prone
Yeah.
and are continuing to be injury prone. Young Hansen, who there's a big pick this year, he's done absolutely nothing. Caleb Love, who's an undrafted free agent for them, has been far better than Young Hansen. You know, if the Wizards, I think the Blazers are probably 2 years ahead of like timeline wise where the Wizards are at currently. If the Wizards 2 years from now started 12 and 19 and are just like happy to be at 500 at 23 and 23, like I think that's a failure. I think they'd view it as a failure. That's not where you want to be. Like you want to be at the top of the West, and the Blazers are fighting and clawing to make the playoffs and maybe even not make the play-in. And if they do, they're nowhere near good enough to compete with any of the heavy hitters out west. Like
Yeah.
they will not beat OKC in a 7-game series. I don't think they would beat Denver and Jokic in a 7-game series. I would probably even take the Lakers, who aren't playing good, ahead of them in a 7-game series. Like they aren't one of those top contenders, and that's where the Wizards want to be. Like they want to be good. But they don't want to just go from really bad to okay to good to great. They want to go to great, and they don't want to get off of great. They want to stay there. And that's what the Thunder have done. And so Michael Winger, one of the things he said that was so great was like, we're not chasing mediocrity. Like it's so easy in this league to be okay and to be solid. You can build that roster in 2 seconds, but it's difficult to be great and stay great. And that's what they're trying to do for the long call. So they don't need to be the Blazers where they're working to be 500. They want to be the Thunder where they just are okay, maybe make the playoffs, but then losing the play-in, and then next year, bang, they're a top 2, top 3 team in their conference. Like, that's what they want. So I think it's very different sides of the trade, and if the Blazers are content with where they're at, which seems to be the case, then sure. But I think the Wizards are probably in a better spot, and I think what Dawkins said about mediocrity really speaks to sort of why this new front office is really working.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And then another thing Michael Winger said that I want to ask you about is he was asked about the cap space they're going to have this offseason, which they're going to have I think it's $45 million in cap space this offseason. He didn't really commit to saying what they were going to do with it, which is I expected that. But he mentioned possibly using it up in the next week, possibly waiting. He's like, who knows? What are your takes on that? Do you think they do anything with that cap? Do you think they just kind of sit on it like the Pistons have? Like, what are your thoughts?
I don't think they want to use it to sign anybody that would derail the rotations they have or be too ball dominant or mess up the rotations. I think it's a good thing to have that cap space. And you mentioned earlier taking back a bloated contract in a possible trade for a guy like Bagley. I think they are in a great position to do that because they have so much cap space for next season. At the deadline last year, you saw them take back Chris Middleton from that Kuzma trade. The main thing was to get the pick swap and to get AJ Johnson, not necessarily to get Chris Middleton, but the veteran mentor stuff really, I'm sure, helped the young guys. But they took on a really bad contract for the following year to do so. And they were okay with that because they sort of had to take back more money to meet that cap floor and to utilize the cap space. CJ McCollum, again, they took on an extra year of his contract, or they got an expiring to dump off an extra year of Jordan Poole. So they've showed that they can also offload that if they want to, which is a very smart, foresighted move that was allowed them to get Trae Young. But now with Trae, if he opts in, if they extend him, like you mentioned, they'll have around 45, 50 million in cap space. If they want to take back another contract like Marcus Smart's, right, where it's not using all of it, but it's another 20 million on your cap hit for next season, you can buy him out, you can save a little money, and if you're taking back another first round pick to do so, you do it in 10 seconds. Like it's the same thing with the Hawks. Like the Hawks didn't trade Trae Young because he's not good. They traded him because they didn't want to pay him all that money. The Wizards were like, hey, we're not going to give you ample value for him, but our value is that we can take back a really bad contract that you don't want for next season. And I think that is way more valuable around the league than like a late round pick or a second round pick. And so if the Wizards can get paid to do so, I think that's probably the more valuable way to utilize that cap space. But maybe they have some notable free agents. Like again, I don't think that they want to do that. They have 6 or 7 first round picks. Jameer Watkins, Tristan Vukcevic are looking like pretty solid second round picks. They'll have their top 8 protected pick this year. They have another first this year. I don't necessarily think that they need to go out and big spend this offseason. Maybe they sign a free agent like Bagley, right, who's a vet minimum, can back up Sarr, someone like that, because I'll have the cap space to do so. But I think Winger's playing his cards close to his chest. I think it's smart to not give too much away. I do think that if you can get paid to take back a bad contract, I would do it. Because then you have those extra firsts. You don't have to use them all. You can spend them in a trade if you really want another guy. And so I think that's probably the best way to utilize the cap space. And I don't know if it's the best free agent class. Like I don't think Giannis is a free agent. I'm not sure if he is.
I don't think he is.
But I haven't seen too much talk about like this is going to be a great free agent class. Like I think for the Wizards, they'd be better served sort of going off the blueprint and the formula they've used the last couple years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they should take the same approach the Pistons have over the last year or two, where they're building on the margins. They've got their main core. They've got role players they really like. They just need to find guys. They need to find ways to slightly improve on what they already have. Is what I'm looking at. But is there anything else that Michael Winger said during that press conference that really stood out to you, or that has been like, yeah, that's worth noting, worth talking about?
Yeah, I mentioned the biggest thing was that mediocrity quote because Tommy Shepard would have ate that up. He would have loved to be 23 and 23 right now. but he's not here, and that's the reason for it, is because he loved mediocrity probably too much. Um, I think what stood out to me is like they reiterated that they're still on the same plan. Like it seems to me like they met, June 2023 and said, "Hey, look, here's the plan. We got to first start by tearing down this roster as much as we can, and it'll take 2 years to do so." They didn't just throw everything out and say it's a yard sale, whatever the best price is, you take it. Like they were patient with it, and they said, "Hey, Brad, you want to go now? We can get." That was a crazy trade package for Bradley Beal. Like 3 years now, everyone can admit it. Like he did not work out in Phoenix. He hasn't even worked out in the with Clippers after they stretched his contract. The Wizards fleeced that trade, and so they got him out. They
Absolutely.
said, "Look, KP, we probably can't get great value for you. We can get a second round pick and Tyus Jones. Like that's the best we could probably do." And so they made the trade to trade him. And so once that happened, your two stars were gone, and you were patient with Kuzma. And now that was the one blunder. You probably could have gotten a better package for Kyle, but you eventually traded him. You waited as long as you can for Denny's breakout. He broke out, and then you traded him for two first round picks. And you even had to wait until a couple weeks ago to trade Corey Kispert. And so like they were very patient in waiting for offers on this rebuild and in this deconstruction phase. And so for him to sort of say, "Look, it's over. We're moving on to the next phase," it's nice to see like they had a plan. And I think the next phase is the sort of like when you said, I think he said, see like which players here, which first round pick should stick. Which players showcase that they really can help us win games and which can't. And I think that's very vital to say, and it's very noble of a front office to say, "Look, we might not be right about all of these guys." It's very hard for a front office to make 8, 9 first round picks and draft picks in total, trades and all that, and be right on everything. And they know that's the case. That'll probably happen. And so I think it's nice to see them say, "Look, if one of our picks isn't panning out, and we're not going to give out an extension just because we drafted them. Like we're gonna go based on the results." And so I think this next phase is sort of seeing, like Winger said, who should be here with this contending team, and maybe who shouldn't. What positions they need to look to fill at next year's deadline or in the offseason with some of the cap space that they might have. Which veterans should stick around? I think that's very noble of them. Like they're not getting rushed because we've seen some great games from Alex Sarr and Keyshawn George and Trey Johnson. They know they're still pretty far away from being a really good contender and a great team for years. And so I think that I respect that they're not rushing or getting ahead of themselves. They're still taking the same approach, because it's worked to this point. So I don't think they need to get ahead of themselves. And I thought that was the best messaging that I heard from Winger.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And even with the Kuzma trade, they weren't 100% sold on that package from the Mavericks. So they asked him, like, "Hey, would you rather be here or would you rather be with the Mavs?" And Kuzma chose to stay. And I think that really shows a complete change in the philosophy of the entire franchise, because several years ago, they didn't care about players. Under many of the GMs between now and 1979, when we last won 50 games, many of the general managers of this franchise did not care. They would move guys for little to nothing, and they would not give a crap what the guy thought. Even if they didn't even like the results super as well as they could have. If they were 50-50, they were like, "Yeah, let's do it." They didn't ask the player for a very long time. And so I think just asking Kuzma what he was thinking was huge. Is just a huge sign of how great and how classy this front office is and has been and will continue to be. And I think I have liked just about everything that Will Dawkins and Michael Winger have done since taking over back in 2023. And you mentioned they probably had a meeting where they sat down. I remember a report about them having a meeting with Ted Leonsis and being like, "Hey, here's our plan." And then like immediately after that, everybody was gone. Or at least the main two guys from the season before. So I do think you were right about that, and I liked everything they've done. But since we've mentioned it several times now, the draft is coming up. The Wizards currently hold the worst record in the league, which means they have a guaranteed top 5 pick. Assuming that holds, which I'm thinking it might because they are not playing guys at this point. We saw Anthony Gill get heavy minutes in back-to-back games. I don't think they're going to be putting too much effort into rotations. What's your top 5 looking like right now? What's your Wizards big board? And specifically, like, what order do you put the main four guys that are guaranteed to be in the top four? What order are you putting those guys in? Who are you picking fifth if we end up fifth? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. It's never, by the way, it's never too early to start talking about the draft because that's like the Super Bowl or the NBA Finals for this team is the lottery and then the draft. The lottery is like the World Cup selection pool, and then the World Cup is the draft. Like that is what the season is for. It's to develop your players, right? And to sort of see like, okay, we made some good picks the year before, but it's all really coming down to this because they could have tried to compete this year. You saw when they were competitive and healthy like they won 7 of 12. Like they were 5-1 over a stretch, or 4-1 over a stretch. Like they can clearly compete probably better than they are. And again, it makes sense because this draft class is insane. You know, they talked about last year as being one of the best draft classes of all time. I think this draft class clears last year's draft class. Like Cooper Flag, I think goes one still in this draft class, but like it's not a lock that he does. And Dylan Harper, who went two, might be going 5 or 6. That's how good this draft class realistically is. Um, Top five for me is it's always tough because last year was easy, right? Like it was
Yeah,
pretty consensus. And the draft really started, I think, at Edgecombe, right at 3, but most people
yeah,
knew that he would probably go at 3. For me, like and this is probably going to be surprising to a lot of people. I have Cameron Boozer at 1, and a lot of people aren't going to agree with that because
ooh,
they don't think he has the ceiling of some number one picks. I think you can get caught up in chasing for a high ceiling, like when you know Cameron Boozer is going to be an unbelievable NBA player. He's so good, and he's dominating literally anybody that they throw at him. And a lot of people are saying, "Hey, well, he's not a center." That's okay if you're Washington because you have a 7 footer in Alex Sarr and you have a need at a true power forward spot to fill him in. I think he would work so well alongside Sarr. And I think the Wizards are in the position where they should be drafting for upside. They should be drafting for best player available. But they've also have so many guys in place that they
yeah.
could factor fit in. Like they really could. If there was another center that could go one, he was the best player in the draft. Like I doubt the Wizards would really take him. So I think Boozer fitting so well alongside Sarr, and also to me being the best player in college basketball by a mile this season on the one of the best teams in college basketball. Like that gets it done for me. Debanza dropping 43 last night was really cool to see. Some people have some concerns about his outside jumper and whether that can develop. I have zero concerns about it. By the way, I again, the Wizards have been able to develop shooter. I mean, Bob Carrington is one of the best shooters on this team. He really didn't take many threes in college. Like it's not that difficult for me to comprehend that he could develop a 3-point shot in the league. And even with that, I still have Peterson at 2, and I have the Bans at 3. Aaron Peterson, people that have played, Christian Braun, who played and won a national championship with Kansas, I think tweeted like 2 days ago. He thinks that Darren Peterson's the best player to ever play at Kansas, which is insane praise for a guy who's played, what, 10 full games for the team. I don't know if he's a
And
true
Wilt.
point guard. Like I don't know if Darren Peterson has the true like I can distribute and facilitate the way that this Wizards team sort of maybe needs that point guard of the future. He's a very good scoring guard, and I think he could develop that court vision. And if he was like dishing out all these assists and playmaking a little bit better, maybe I'd have him at 1. But I have him slightly behind Boozer at 2. And again, like if they took any of these 3 guys at 1, I wouldn't be upset. Like they're that close and they all are so different, which is so weird to see top three prospects that have such different games and bring such different things to your team, different positions and all that. So again, I got to preface it by like if they took any of these guys, it would be a home run, like 100% a home run. If they're top 3, you can't lose. But I think I would go as of right now, Boozer, Peterson, and then Debanza. At 4, I have Caleb Wilson, and I think there's a slight drop off from him and the top 3, but really not that much the way that he's brought it back. I think UNC had a big road win at UVA, and Caleb Wilson was a driving force in that.
Hmm.
He also fits a lot of what Dawkins and Winger like. He's probably a more of a Dawkins prospect than Boozer because he has the positional size. He can defend multiple positions. He has the length. He's really good on defense, protecting the rim. He can play on ball. Like he sort of is the ideal Dawkins prospect. And so again, I could get behind Washington, probably maybe taking him higher than some might think. And so that would be my top four. And then at five, I have Kingston Flemings. And again, yesterday's performance sort of solidified that ranking for me. But he's just a point guard, and he can score the rock. Like, and it wasn't just shooting the ball. Like he can shoot, but he can get downhill. He got to the cup at will. He found his teammates. Like, he's what this team needs. And if Peterson's already gone, and you have Trae Young for next year, you're like, hey, we can just take a guy that we can sort of build behind Trae Young. And if we don't think Trae's this point guard of the future, you just have Kingston Flemings that comes in. And honestly, I'm fine with any of those five prospects. Obviously, you want the top three. Obviously, you want the top one. But if you are the worst team in the league, like you mentioned, and if that holds, they can't fall beyond the fifth pick. And if that's the case, I don't think you can go wrong anywhere in this draft, especially if you do get unlucky like Utah last year. It's not like, dang, we could have gotten Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper, and now we got to settle for Ace Bailey. We didn't get the top pick, but we have one of the best point guard prospects in a decade that just falls into our lap.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't, then you're still getting another guy that you really want. So that's why it was so important to be as bad as you could be this year. That's why they made some trades and moved stuff around and sort of ended their winning ways pretty abruptly, because they know how vital getting this pick right could be for the trajectory of their team.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few things I'll note here, just to emphasize how unbelievably stacked this draft class is. We've had a string of historically great drafts to the point where we looked at a draft in 2024 that historically is still good. It's still like I'm not actually. I'll take a step back. It's good. It's not great. It's average historically, and we're like, this is the worst draft class we've ever seen, right? Since 2020, we have had that's the worst draft class we've had, and it's historically average, maybe even slightly above, depending on how guys pan out. But we're in this ridiculous string of draft classes, and we're looking at possibly far and away the best one, right? Of these strings, we've seen of this string of draft classes, we've seen the average draft class have two players with a box plus minus of 10 or higher. There are 5 in this draft class. Believe it or not, it's the 5 guys you mentioned, who I do think are pretty much set to be the top 5. Order of which you go, it really depends, but really that's the top 5 right now. But Cameron Boozer is having, statistically, the greatest season in Duke history.
That's insane.
He's having a better season than Cooper Flagg. He's having a better season than Paolo. He's having a better season than Zion. What are we, it's ridiculous. And then most people have him going third, right? I personally have him going third as well. I think he doesn't have the upside of the other two guys, but I think his floor is significantly higher. He's 6'11", 250 pounds, can shoot the 3-ball. You don't see guys like that very often. AJ Dibansa, he looks like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander did in college. Darren Peterson looks like a modernized version of Kobe. And then going down to Caleb Wilson, he's projected 4th by 90% of people. He would be the first overall pick in 80% of draft classes. And then you look at Kingston Flemings. He is the greatest slashing point guard in college history. I saw a graph. They took percent of drives and then points per possession, and they have Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook, De'Aaron Fox, and then way up in the top right corner, nowhere near anybody else in a class of his own, Kingston Flemings, nowhere near anybody else. He's just that ridiculously good at getting to the basket. Dylan Harper, nowhere near him, and we're seeing how great of a slasher he is. And obviously we know De'Aaron Fox, we know Derrick Rose, how great they are, Russell Westbrook. This is just an unbelievably great draft class, where even picking in the top 6 or 7 is almost as good as picking in the top 3 in any other draft class in the last longer than I've been alive.
It's insane. You mentioned Kingston Flemings, it's just he would have been a top 2, top 3 pick last year, and he's probably going to definitely go outside the top 4 this year. And they're all freshmen. It's not previous drafts where sometimes you get a second year, third year guy, or there's an international guy. I think the NIL stuff has probably been big for college, because maybe some of these guys would have gone overseas. But you had 2 French guys in Rhys Haché and Sarr go 1-2 2 years ago. You seemingly always have some sort of international play, but those guys are now playing in college basketball because they're getting paid to do so. And so I think you're seeing a lot of shift into like now it's not too much international guys at the top of the draft. It's more so all guys that play in college. And I think that's why it's heightened because no one watched Risache or Sarr when they were playing in France or in Australia. But they're watching Duke and Houston and UNC games. And so they're starting to see how good these guys actually are before the draft. And so I think that's part of the hype, but they're also producing at an insane level. And so
Absolutely.
I think the Wizards, they don't need to necessarily hit a home run. And that's why I have Boozer at one. I think he's just the best player. And I think he would be so great in this Wizards team. But it's also a philosophy of Will Dawkins likes upside. He likes length. He likes positional versatility. I don't think that's really what Boozer offers you. And so if you're Dawkins, like it doesn't really fit your mold. Now, if they're at three and the other two go 1, 2, again, I would not be surprised if he took Caleb Wilson over Boozer. Like that's just the play that he would make. It fits his ideal type. I wouldn't be surprised if they took Kingston Flemings there because they need a point guard. I mean, how many times have you seen Wizards fans scream at Bub Carrington or any other point guard to get in the paint? They just get in the paint. Trae Young will do that for you, but like Kingston Flemings will do that for you, like you mentioned, better than anyone else in college basketball history. He's going to be exactly what you need at the point guard spot. He's only 19. Like that is an awesome pick. And so again, it goes back to you need to be the worst team record wise. And that's sad to like root for that, but if you can if your floor is Kingston Flemings, then you have done the best job that you can possibly do. If you get unlucky, that's okay, but Kingston Flemings is not an unlucky selection. That's very lucky to position yourself
Yeah.
to get a guy that's as good, as young as he is. And so I think basically what we just did is I talked myself into the fact that this team's gonna be really good next year, no matter who they pick.
Yeah, they're in what could possibly be one of the best positions in the league, where you've got your young core, you're gonna get a good player. I think you have two All-Star caliber players on the roster right now in Trae Young and Alex Sarr. You got a couple guys whoever they're next year's rookie, and then Trey Johnson, Keyshawn George. I think they all have potential to be an all-star. Don't know if they all reach that. Trey Johnson reminds me a lot of Ray Allen more and more every day. But it's one of those things where they're in a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful position moving forward. Especially if they, like I said, top 5 pick, you're set in this draft class. It's probably the best draft class since 1996, where they had 8 guys or they claimed to have 8 guys where you could not go wrong, and then it ended up being like 3 or 4. I think this has potential to go down as the greatest to draft class ever. But yeah, this is a very exciting position to be in for this team.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like you mentioned, you can't go wrong. But they just got to do the work now, which is losing, and developing, and they seemingly can do that pretty well.
Yeah, and then keeping in this upcoming free off season, that we have a ton of money, and we're gonna need. And I know a lot of guys around the fan base and a lot of fans are really wanting to focus on finding role players to support this team. I've seen guys like Peyton Watson, who's a restricted free agent this offseason, Mitchell Robinson, Keon Ellis as free agent names to target for the Wizards from fans. What do you think of those 3 guys? Are there anybody else that you think the Wizards should target in free agency? And realistically, how much money would you throw?
Which were the guys you just mentioned?
I mentioned I've had Peyton Watson, who's a restricted free agent, Mitchell Robinson, and Keon Ellis are names I've seen thrown around quite often.
I mean, the Knicks would be stupid to let him go because they're so much better when he plays. The obviously issue is that he's not really healthy too much. So like I could see them giving him, an extension. I could see them bringing him back. I also would see that he would want a starting role, and I don't think that necessarily would fit too well alongside Sarr. Peyton Watson is like the prototypical Dawkins player. If you just watch them lose to the Nuggets the other night, I think he had 35 on like
Yeah.
6 of 8 from 3. Like he's developing at an unbelievable pace. He'll be restricted, so Denver will have the ability to match, but they don't have the greatest cap space. Like they are paying Jokic and Murray a lot of money. They're paying Cameron Johnson, I think, 23 million or so a year.
Yeah,
They
and
have
Christian
other
Brown's
role
on a big
players.
deal too.
Christian Brown too. Like some teams just can't afford it, and that's fine. Like you see it with an OKC. Like eventually, like they're gonna draft these guys. They can't afford to extend them. They have their 3 blue chip players. They're all on max contracts. they need to just continue to restock their draft picks and just use them to draft well and replace. Like Casey Wallace, again, is a guy that they could just move into like a role of like a Caruso if they can't afford someone like him. And so I think at a certain point, Denver has to do that. And that's what all these teams with a second apron have to do. So, if Watson plays this way the entire season, he's going to get a bag that I don't think Denver can match. And a team like the Wizards that has a ridiculous amount of cap space and can just spend it, I think that might make sense. We haven't seen Dawkins and Winger sign like a splash free agent yet. It's been low key deals, right, to Bagley and to guys like Champagny, to where they look awesome and it showcases that they can do it on a smaller scale. But are you willing to be bold and give Peyton Watson like 30 to 35 a year? Because that's a lot of money. Money that probably Denver can't match. So if they really like him, he makes sense. I think that would fit on their team. Now I could also see a role where it's like, look, we could sign guys, but we like the guys that we drafted, and we have other guys that we want to give roles to, and we don't necessarily want to see Will Riley relegated to the G League in this second year. Like we think Will Riley can be Peyton Watson and better with the reps. So why would we shell out $35 million when we can just give our guy that we drafted reps and give him the ability to grow and learn with this team? So I could also see that as sort of a driving point. I did see a report recently that linked them to Walker Kessler. I think
I was
McMahon
going to
and
ask you about that
ESPN,
next. Yeah.
like big. I'm just locked in today. I just knew you were gonna ask me that. Um, Again, like it's just stuff like that where I'm not saying that McMahon isn't plugged in because I'm sure he is at ESPN, but like, why would the Wizards give out that much money to another center? Like
Hmm.
Walker Kessler probably doesn't want to go somewhere to not start when he could probably start in Utah. And
Yeah.
why would the Wizards shell out that much money for a guy that they want to play off the bench? Like that doesn't necessarily make much sense to me. And so you'll probably start to see a lot of rumors like that. And maybe it's like agents trying to get these guys to push that so that Utah is like, oh, well, there's interest around the league. We need to give him an extension now, which could be the case. And so, again, if I'm the Wizards, why would I give out a big contract to a free agent that's a center? I wouldn't. If you want to sign a low key Bagley, Rashawn Holmes type player to back up Sarr again, that's fine by me. If you want to just give it to Vucevic, that's fine by me. But if you're going to shell out big money, it's got to be for a wing, I think, especially if Trae Young's here at point guard. But if it's me, like I'm not. Like it's okay to keep cap space and be able to take back more bad contracts in the future or extend guys. What's not okay is giving out these ridiculous contracts to where you're now kind of in cap hell and you can't sign these free agents that you really want, make big trades that you really want. Because a guy like Giannis, and I'm not saying Giannis is coming to the Wizards, but a lot of teams around the league are kicking themselves for some bad trades, some bad asset management that they had in the future because now they can't take Giannis back. Like the Knicks trading 5 firsts unprotected for Mikal Bridges, they're probably like, why did we do that? Because Giannis is there. And I understand it was a move that they made at the time. They've gone 2 full years out of Bridges, 2 playoff runs. But a lot of teams around the league are like, we could have just been patient with our cap and our draft picks, and now we can't get a guy that we think could change our future. Maybe that's where the Wizards try to position themselves to do so. So, like, yes, they have the space, and I think Peyton Watson would fit here, but they don't have to do it. They don't have to shell out these contracts. The OKC didn't do that until they signed Hartenstein, and then they were the number 1 seed. And it's the same thing with they didn't make the move for Caruso until after that they were the number 1 seed. They won the title, and so it's moves like this that sort of I would understand with Watson, but they don't have to do it, right? They're in a good position to where they can just keep their salary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll compare I'll compare where our situation to a couple teams as well. We're in a very similar situation to where Detroit was 2 years ago, where we're not really that good. We're gonna get a really good pick, but we're also not paying anybody. And then what Detroit did that offseason, just other than fire Troy Weaver and Monty Williams, they went and got Tobias Harris. They went and got B-Ball Paul. They got Malik Beasley. They got the guys to support the players that they wanted, and then that got them to the playoffs. And now they're sitting here, far and away the best team in the East. They're able to build on the margins now while still having this ridiculous amount of cap space. I think they're still set to have $85 million this offseason. Like they are set. They're probably realistically in the best spot in the league out of anybody. And realistically, they could even contend with the Thunder, who's the other team, like you said, I see a lot of in, where they kind of did the opposite. They waited until they were already the one seed and really good. And then they went and found out, okay, what's working, what's not working. Josh Giddey doesn't really fit with anybody, our main guys. So they shipped him for Caruso, who fit perfectly, and somehow got draft picks out of it. Wonderful. They were like, we got dominated by Jonas Valanciunas in the first round. That was a really bad matchup for us. We need bulk. Isaiah Hartenstein. And since then, they've drafted guys who can potentially fill into those two roles. Cason Wallace can fit that Caruso role. They got Thomas Sorber, who we don't know what he's going to look like post ACL. Same thing with Nikola Topic. We don't really know what he's going to look like after battling cancer and tearing his ACL. We don't really know. But those are two guys who can also come in and fit into different roles that they have for role players, and like you mentioned, so like I could see the Wizards really going either way, where like maybe they dish out like 1 year $30 million for a good role player that they know is going to come in and be like perfect for this team. Or I could also see them sitting around being like, okay, let's wait until we see what the weak spots are in the playoffs and then address that when we get there. So I could see the Wizards really go in either direction with that. And I think Keon Ellis and Peyton Watson, if they are going to go that Detroit path, I think those are far and away the two best options there. 3-and-D options, athletic, can really culture-changing defensive players.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, Keon was sort of a big part when things were pretty good, and now he's sort of been taken out of the rotation. So I don't know if that's just like a difference in opinion, or they think that they can use other skill sets. But again, like he is a pretty prototypical guard that you sort of
Yeah.
can put on another top guard, and he does his job. And so again, like if you find a pretty cheap deal for a guy like that can come off the bench, and you're like, look, we have some guys in the waiting, but for now, for this year, we think that Keon can sort of take us there. Then sure, it's also it does fit the timeline, right? Like I think with what Wenger said, like they might not be in the position next year where they're like, we want to sign free agents to send like Detroit just did. They
Mm-hmm.
might just want to again, instead of like playing their young guys a bunch and not really wanting to win games, they want to play them a lot and say, hey, you guys have no leash, like go as far as you guys can with this current group of young players. And that'll give us plenty enough information to say, we want to keep these guys, we want to trade these guys. Here's where we don't have enough at the moment. That's where we're going to strike with our assets. Sort of like what OKC did. And so I think next year will be more fun, but it might not necessarily be a year where they're like, we need these free agents to kind of take us to the next step. They might want to do something different and just say, look, we made all these draft picks. Let's see what they can do.
Yeah.
You know, again, you mentioned with the Pistons firing Monty. I don't know if they'll fire Keefe. Maybe they'll give him one more year. I think he's
I
still
don't
under
think.
contract.
Yeah,
So we'll
I
see.
don't think Keith. I don't think Keith gets fired even next year. I think they're gonna give him a year or two in the playoffs, see how he performs as coach. Because in my opinion, as long as a coach holds the locker room, it would be a mistake to fire him. I think the only time you should fire a head coach is if they've lost the locker room. You have players visibly disengaged with the coaching staff, like you saw Memphis last year under I'm forgetting his name, but their head coach
Taylor
last year.
Jenkins.
Taylor Jenkins, his replacement is who.
Thomas Lioso.
Yes, yes, because John Morant was still bought into Taylor Jenkins, and he refused to listen to the next coach. And now they're on their third coach in 3 years. They're kind of in purgatory. They went all in on this young core who's now like, I don't really want. I don't know if I necessarily want to be here, and they're kind of stuck, and they don't have the value that they would have gotten from John Morant 3 years ago. They don't have the value from Jaren Jackson that they would have gotten a year ago. But it's only just now starting to fall apart, or well, fully realizing how bad it's come along. I think as long as this team is still like we're all in on Brian Keefe, we trust Brian Keefe, and which to me the trust with him is very obvious. You can see it and just about every player on the roster. The only guy where you aren't really seeing that really is Cam Whitmore, and Cam Whitmore hasn't been playing. So I think as long as they are still bought into Keefe and still trust him to take them to championships in the future, I think it would be a mistake to fire.
That's very again like it seems like he has that trust, and again like when they were winning games, he was doing a pretty good job. Like again, if they have someone in mind, I could see them maybe doing it earlier to say like we want to build some camaraderie this year. But again, like Mark Daigneault was the coach of the Thunder throughout the rebuild.
Yeah.
And that's obviously what you want, is that sort of connection between coach and players that doesn't just start right when you're trying to compete. It was been building for the last 2 or 3 years. So
Yeah, and another example is Mike Malone was there throughout Denver's rebuild. Like, you get a stronger trust between players and coach that will show, and you'll see it in the playoffs after when you got a guy who's been through the rebuild with you guys, and you can tell like Keefe knows they're trying to lose. Like, otherwise Anthony Gill wouldn't be getting extended minutes. AJ Johnson wouldn't be the primary playmaker on the floor. Sharif Cooper played extended minutes against Charlotte. Like, he knows they're trying to lose. I think when we went on that, what was it, 7-10 10-game stretch, it was he made really good rotations. We saw his ability to coach in full display, and we had a better record than the Thunder in that stretch. Right? We were, I think, the second best team in the league for a very brief for that stretch, or at least a top 5, top 10. And so I think firing Keefe, when he's able to do that in short stints with, let's be honest, a subpar roster compared to some of these other teams, I think firing him would be a mistake. And I think he could be the coach to lead us to that championship.
it's very possible. Again, like the players are a big part of it. The drafting is a big part of it. Like I don't think Brian Keefe is the reason this team is so bad. Again,
No.
I think that's what they want to do. I don't think Brian Keefe has done anything to be like he needs to be here because he's done so well with a group that's so bad. Like
Yeah.
OKC was low-key overachieving at certain points with Dagnall, and so you sort of saw it. But again, like a whole thing could flip. Like when the Wizards were winning all those games, like they were healthy and they were competing. I guess they didn't have Key for most of it, but like you add another top pick, this roster sort of rounds out. You have Trae Young. Brian Keefe really hasn't had an actual point guard to run the offense since he's been the coach. And so when you give him all those elements, I think it would be pretty unfair to say, look, you just don't have it because your roster was one of the worst in the league for when you were coaching, right?
Yeah.
I think it's fair to maybe give him next year if Trae Young's healthy and say, look, you win as many games as you want, and we'll sort of reassess after the year. I think that's fair for both parties. If he doesn't get enough done, then you can say, hey, we're going to move in a different direction. And if you're like, hey, we enjoyed what you were able to do, the locker room is fine, we'll give you another shot when we have an actual contending roster. And so I don't think you can go too wrong here. And like you mentioned, I think they'll give him a little bit more runway than some people might think.
Yeah. And also, while this Wizards team has definitely underperformed based on the talent on the roster, in my opinion, I think we could absolutely be way closer to the Jazz. I think it all comes back down to we don't want mediocrity from Michael Winger. I think they're mandating we need to lose so many games. We need to finish so and so spot in the conference or in the NBA, and I think that's why we're seeing some of these absolutely horrible lineups on the floor where we've got Sharif Cooper, AJ Johnson, and Anthony Gill all on the floor at the same time, and SARS off the floor. Like, I think there's a reason we're getting some of these lineups, and it's not because Keefe doesn't know how to coach. I think it's more of he knows that we need to lose X amount of games in order to keep a top 5 pick.
100%.
Yeah, so I think they give him a shot in the playoffs, and if he underperforms in the playoffs, maybe they let him go. Maybe they give him another year to maybe round out the roster a little bit more. But I do think Keefe will get an opportunity to coach this team into the playoffs.
I think you're right. I think they'll give him an opportunity. It's up to him to see what he can do with it.
But I think that's all I got for you today, Greg. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. And anybody out there, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.